My name is Josef Troch. I'm from Commerzbank, and I will tell you today a bit about agile methodologies. Before starting with the main topic, I wanted to tell few sentences about Commerzbank. So we are the second biggest bank in Germany overall. They're offering the complete set of services. In Czech Republic, just some limited setup for large and mid-sized companies. We own, well, majority in mBank, which probably all the people in Czech Republic do know. Yeah, and altogether we have about 600 employees in Prague, bigger part of that in the IT area, so development, support, infrastructure, and so on. And we have as well some program for students where they are working something like half of the normal working time. Yeah, whoever is interested, feel free to contact me later. But getting to the main topic. So where I wanted to start with the Waterfall Model. You have probably heard about this already. So this is an old model used for software development, and it's still being used in some companies even this time. It basically starts with collecting the requirements. Once this is done, then someone works on the application or software design. Once that is done, the process continues with development, testing, and so on, phase by phase. Basically, once one of the phases finished, the other ones start. It has some advantages, like it's possible to plan things in advance somehow. When you are starting with development, you have all the requirements and all the design decisions made. So you can just start working on that and nothing is distracting you. Nothing is changing during the time. That's the advantage. But, well, it has as well some disadvantages. And the main problem is actually that waterfall model is not really usable in cases when you have changes in everything. So in the requirements on the market, it cannot really react on changes. So you need to, if you are following that model and there is some change that's big, you need to completely replan things and change them. It does not work well with changes. Second, and maybe the biggest problem, is that you are getting the feedback from the customer very late, right? So you get through all the steps here, down there to the deployment phase, yeah. And once it's deployed to production, at that moment you get the feedback from the customer. So the whole development is already done. Everything before that is already done, and after deploying it to production, you finally find out, for example, that the original users wanted something different than what they told you in the beginning, because, well, maybe they were not able to communicate that well what they really want, or after seeing it in reality, they found out that, well, okay, they wanted something, but something else would work much better. So you are getting this feedback after very long time, and once again incorporating this feedback somehow into the software development is at that moment difficult, or too late, I would say. Yeah, these are, I would say, the main problems that we face with the waterfall model, which is still used in some companies. So as these problems were visible overall to many people, there started something that was not in the beginning actually called agile. The first thing that we can consider being a start of agile was what IBM called incremental development in 1957. So it's more than 50 years ago. It's nothing like really new. And in 1995, Scrum was somehow invented or I think some book was that year published on that topic. Not that sure. That's not that important. That's one of the best known, probably, agile methodologies. And in 1996, continuing with extreme programming, in 2001 there was the Agile Manifesto created. I will spend a few words on that later. Yeah, I'm mentioning as well large-scale Scrum, so one of many attempts to use Scrum for more than one team, but there are many others, not just this one. And in 2010, actually, Kanban was defined for software development because it originally came from manufacturing area. Yeah. Okay. Would you ever hear anyone talking about agility? Then this is this kind of dog sport. It's not about being agile. Good. Getting to Agile Manifesto, or officially Manifesto for Agile Software Development. That was created by a group of programmers somewhere in America. I don't really remember the year, but it was on one of the slides before. And they basically formulated that they formulated 4 statements out of that, saying which values they value more than some others. So just to read it through, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. That does not mean that the things on the right side should be completely forgotten, but that the things on the left side, they value more, and actually I value more as well, because I think that this manifesto covers the values there in a very reasonable way. Would you want to learn more about that? There's some link for it, but secondly, you can even study. We have someone new joining, at least it seems like that. Okay, good. Yeah, so besides these 4 principles that are forming the Agile Manifesto, there are 12 additional principles in the background that you can find somehow depicted on the right side, but as well you can of course read it on agilemanifesto.org. But these 4 statements are the core part. The rest is, at least in my eyes, not that important. So, getting to Scrum. Scrum is definitely the best known agile methodology overall. It's quite prescriptive, and this picture displays it all on one screen. Yeah, so we have there some roles, some product owner, some development team, some Scrum Master. We have there product backlog, some sprint backlog, then there are some Scrum events, so sprint planning, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and so on. I will talk about all this in more detail in few minutes. And it's all iterative. So one iteration in the world of Scrum is called sprint. Should have as maximum 1 month, can be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, or any other number, but these are the usual lengths of the sprints. And the thing that's happening every day is the daily Scrum, as well. One event I will talk about. And as a results out of all this cycle, there's coming something that we call potentially releasable increments. So let's say a new version of the software that can be deployed to production if the product owner will decide that it's the time to deploy it to production. So you can think about it as a new version of software. Okay, saying something about the core values there, yeah. So the first one is transparency. Scrum is saying that everything should be made visible for everyone. And as well, it's saying that it should be clearly defined what does it mean if something is done. I have one more slide speaking about definition of done somewhere later. So if we will have enough time, I can go through that one more in detail later. Then inspection. Scrum prescribes that the team should be frequently inspecting all the artifacts and progress towards meeting a sprint goal. So let's say towards delivering what was agreed for that one iteration, that one sprint. To detect some problems and be able to react on them. And adaptation actually is to some extent what I said already. So to be able to react on things that are not going as was expected or planned, but besides that as well, a possibility to adapt somehow the process itself. Yeah, and for that there are 4 formal events. I already talked about them. So sprint planning, daily scrum, sprint review, and retrospective. I will talk about them more in detail as well in a few minutes. So getting to the Scrum team, yeah. You know that the word Scrum is coming from rugby, right? So what the Scrum originally means is what you can see on the left side. So Scrum team is formed from product owner, a single person that's responsible mainly for saying what should be done and giving some prioritization. So defining clearly how the individual items that should be developed, what should be their content, how it should work, and giving prioritization on them. Product owner can delegate some of these activities to the development team, but he is always the accountable person there. So So the prioritization, I would say, is the most crucial thing, and I think that this part will usually not be delegated. Okay, then there's Scrum Master, which is basically helping the team and product owner and company with implementing Scrum, living it, and removing the impediments that are appearing throughout the software development cycle. And then there's the development team, which should have 7 ± 2 people. Yeah, so from 5 to 9. Why? Because if there is less than 5 people, it's just wasting of time to implement Scrum there. It's too heavyweight for really small teams. Why not more than 9? Because if there are more than 9 people in the development team and together with product owner and Scrum Master, you have altogether 11 people. And if you have daily Scrum with 11 people, it's about the maximum in which you can expect that the people would be still listening to what the others are saying. Yeah, that's my practical experience. So I really think that these numbers are somehow correct. Scrum does not define any team leaders, any lead developers, or any managers. This is all out of Scrum. And can somehow work together, but there are quite often problems with that actually. Getting to the development team, yeah. So we said there really that we have just product owner, Scrum Master, and the development team, nothing else. So the development team in that case means that, or in this case means that the development team needs to deliver everything what's needed for that potentially releasable increment. Yeah, so everything is done by them. Nothing from outside should be contributing to it. In an ideal case, product owner and Scrum Master should be dedicated roles, so they are not part of development team. They are part of Scrum team. Yeah? So Scrum team means development team plus Scrum Master plus product owner. Yeah. So in development mean in that case, we would have all the people who would take care of development itself, of business analysis if there is any done, of testing, of documentation, and so on. Scrum is saying that the team should be self-organizing, which goes hand in hand with the fact that there is no manager or team leader in Scrum. So the team really should find the ways how to take care of things themselves. The team should be cross-functional, so really covering all the aspects or all the knowledge, skills that are necessary for implementing the software. And people should have what they call T-shaped skills, meaning that they have their main skill, for example, development in whatever Java. And besides that, they should have some very basic skills as well in the other aspects. Would it be testing, documentation, whatever, front-end development? So the idea is that even if some people from the team will not be able to work, for example, would be sick or whatever, the team themselves should be still able to continue with development and with delivering what they agreed to deliver in this sprint. Yeah, it should not happen that the team would be waiting for someone who is not there and would not be able to progress because of that. So the other people will take care of it. Okay, they are maybe not the experts in that direction, so it might take them longer. Yeah, but they should be able to cope with this. Sprint. I have already talked about it a bit. So sprint is the iteration in the terminology of Scrum. It should be regular, so always the same length, not once 2 weeks and other time 4 weeks. No, always the same length, and it should not be prolonged. Yeah, so really always same length, and it has fixed scope. So whatever is agreed in the beginning on sprint planning, actually, that will be delivered in that sprint, should be delivered in it, and nothing can ever be added into a sprint. Yeah, it's not possible that anyone, product owner or anyone else, would decide, I want a new feature to be added into this sprint. This is not possible. According to Scrum, the only thing that you can do in such a case is that you would cancel the sprint. Yeah, so really cancel it and start from scratch, do again the sprint planning and start a new one, completely abandoning whatever have been created there, which is very rare case, but definitely the scope cannot be changed. Yeah, I've once again included the same picture to remind the activities that are being done or sprint events. So we will be talking about sprint planning over here. Then we will be talking about daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. You see that sprint planning is in the beginning, let's say, of the cycle. Daily Scrum is every day, as the name suggests, and these two are at the end of the sprint. And there is as well something called product backlog refinement. I will spend some minute on it as well, but this thing is not much prescribed by Scrum. This is quite up to you. So getting to the Scrum events or Scrum ceremonies, if you want. So sprint planning is the first one, and there we are starting with something that we call product backlog. I will once again tell a bit more about it later, but it's a backlog, so let's say a list of tasks, list of items that someone would like to get developed sometime. You can see it over here on the left side. And as a result of sprint planning, the intention is to build a sprint backlog, saying what should be developed in that concrete sprint. So yeah, the whole team is participating, should be done before the sprint starts, and as a result, we create a sprint backlog, as I already said. As well, there should be created some rough plan. Plan is maybe too strong word, but some agreement how the work would be done, what would be done the first, what later, and so on. So there might be as well created something that's called sprint goal. Some implementations are using sprint goals, some are not. So if there is sprint goal, then it's the main thing, the most important thing that should be delivered in that concrete sprint. In some implementations, they just say that sprint goal is everything what is in the sprint backlog, so that the team needs to deliver everything. It's basically not that important, but if you really have a sprint goal, then you have clear definition of which item or items in the sprint are the most important ones. So if there would be a situation when the team will see that they cannot deliver everything, which should not happen, by the way, in an ideal case, then they can look on what is sprint goal and try to concentrate on that one and maybe skip some other things. And estimations. It's good to have estimations for this sprint planning because it gives you some idea how big the tasks is, yeah? So how much the team is able to implement in one sprint. There can be many things said about estimations, but let's try to keep it short and simple. Daily Scrum. Daily Scrum is happening daily, well, no surprise. And there should be the development team and Scrum Master. Yeah, they usually meet somewhere or, well, in these times have a call. And the people in the team, in the development team, should answer basically to 3 questions. Yeah. So what did I do yesterday to help the team meet the sprint goal? What will I do today for the same purpose? And whether I have any impediments in my way or in the way of the team to reach the sprint goal. And if there are some, first of all, the team might advise what to do with them. But secondly, if the people are not able, in the team, I mean, to cope with them themselves, then Scrum Master takes them and should try to remove these impediments so the work can continue without problems. So this is really happening every day. And after when the sprint is coming to an end, there are 2 events that I mentioned before. The first of them is sprint review. And in other development methodologies, something similar is called product demo, if you would be more familiar with that wording. And it's about basically presenting to the stakeholders what have been developed in this sprint. Yeah? So just items that are finished are being presented, not things that are half-made. And the presentation itself is done by the development team. There are basically 2 main reasons for this. First is that you want the stakeholders or users to know what you did so they can use it. And second thing is, of course, to get some feedback from them. And you can use this feedback just in the next sprint, for example. Yeah? So basically it might change some things in the product backlog, yeah, reformulate them, give you some more inputs like what the users would really want. Yeah, so basically this is the first possibility to somehow react on changes and feedback from stakeholders or users. And it of course forms an input for sprint planning. If the team or the product owner, actually, because he is responsible for the prioritization, will see that the users feel these 2 features as the most important ones, he will probably try to push them into the next sprint and get them to the sprint backlog. The last formal Scrum event is called sprint retrospective. That's happening at the very end of the sprint, so after sprint review. And it should inspect on how the last sprint went, speaking about everything. Yeah, so people, processes, tools, everything. and it should come with some actions that will improve things. Yeah, so some improvements that would be really doable, concrete. And this way, basically, the whole software development lifecycle can be improved for that concrete team which is using that. Yeah? Every team works slightly differently, so what is good for one might not be that good for some other. So I'm done with the Scrum events. I promised some slides on product backlog and on definition of done. Yeah? So about product backlog, as I said, it's about work that should be done. And it has some order. The items that are prioritized higher there. So usually the ones that are, let's say, more important or more urgent are more clearly defined than the items that are somewhere down in the backlog. And this product backlog is being refined throughout the time. To some extent, it might be done by the product owner himself or herself. As well, it can be done by the development team or both, actually. So it's really an ongoing process that does not have any prescription when and how it should be done. The only thing that the Scrum Guide tells you on that is that it can take up to 10% of the development team capacity. So if you have a team of, 10 people, you can have one person working just directly on this. But this is probably not the most efficient way how to do that. The more common ways are that the team meets once, twice, whatever, and discuss the items that are somewhere at the upper part of product backlog, yeah? Discussing like how it should be done, what informations are missing, and trying to prepare some estimations there, because the estimations are then needed on sprint planning, as I already said. Yeah, I was talking as well about definition of done. Definition of done is giving for every team. So once again, it's a thing that's specific to a concrete team. Is defining what it means if something is done for them. So defining some standards, conventions, whether they are doing code reviews, what should be covered by code reviews, what should be covered by unit tests, which documentation should or should not be done, and so on. It's up to every team. Yeah? There might be a team that will decide that they will not follow any conventions, they will not do any code reviews, and they will not do any testing. Okay, probably not the best decision, but it's up to the team. And can be changing over the time. Yeah? So the sprint retrospective is an ideal place where to discuss the definition of done if you feel that there should be done some changes in it. So I am finished with what I wanted to say about Scrum. Before getting to Kanban, any questions to Scrum?
Hello, Mr. Troch. I have a few questions. First of all, for example, let's say we are running a project with Waterfall Model or Scrum Model. And you said that in Waterfall Model, we get feedback from the customer after the production or in deployment phase. And also, when it comes to sprints, they must always be in same length and fixed scope. Who inspect this? I mean, who check this? What happens if we, for example, request some feedback from the customer anytime we want in Waterfall Model? Or what if the Scrum Master wants to just extend the length of the sprints? What happens then?
Well, Scrum Master is responsible for following the process, for ensuring that the team will stick to it. So if he is not doing his job, well, what do you want to do with him? Maybe replace him? But it's his job. So like who else should be following it if not Scrum Master? To the first question, speaking about feedback, it's difficult to get feedback in Waterfall Model from a customer earlier because you don't have anything you can show to him, right? With Scrum or any other agile methodology, you have things that are somehow half-made or maybe not finished, but still can be shown to the user. So you can get the feedback from him. But if you do not have anything to show, you can try to get feedback from user for your analysis document. That's quite normally done, yeah, but it's not the same as getting feedback to something that the user can really see, like the application.
Thank you. I also would like to ask one more question. You didn't mention, but I'm just wondering, how do we determine what should the functional requirements document contain?
Well, this would be going into another direction. Now you are getting to the area of business analysis. So this is a job of business analyst to find the requirements for, or in our setup at least, it's a job of business analyst. But you can, of course, have a different setup to speak with the users and to find out what they really want there. So, yeah, about that.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So I will continue with Kanban. There will be probably still some time for a few questions at the end. So I'm switching back to my presentation and showing Kanban. Kanban started originally in Toyota, actually, and it was used for car manufacturing originally. And later, I think it was 2010 or when, so not that long time ago, actually, someone came with an idea that it can be easily adapted for software development. It has few basic principles, yeah. So saying that you should start with what you have now. You should be working on some incremental small changes. And it, at least in the beginning, respects the current process roles and so on. Because Scrum does not do this. Yeah? Scrum is saying you should have these roles, yeah, which might not really match with what you have already in your company. You can try to change this, of course, but it's quite bigger change. Whereas in case of Kanban, you can just stick with the roles, processes, and so on that you already have. And maybe adapt them later, yeah, find improvements and so on. The second point was talking about improvements, right? Yeah, and encouraging leadership. So these are the basic principles, but these are just principles, yeah. So not that visible what you should do. So if you look on the right side, there you can see a typical Kanban board, yeah. So one of the core properties of Kanban is visualization. So you should visualize the workflow that you have. Yeah, so you are sticking to the workflow that you already have. Yeah, respecting the current process. You are not changing it, at least not in the beginning. And based on the workflow that you have already, you just need to somehow write it down. Yeah, and then you have some states, and the tickets or items are moving between these states, usually just in one direction. Usually, not always, yeah, but the typical case is that they are moving from left side to the right one. So if I would take the example that's on the right side, you would see that the first column here is called stories. Well, maybe more usual word would be backlog, actually. The second state here is to do. Next one is is in progress, then testing, and then done. Every team might have these states different. You can have, for example, even just 3 states, and you can have 8 of them. It depends team to team, process to process. So once you have this workflow visualized, by the way, this thing on the right side is called a Kanban board, and it's quite commonly used in Scrum, although it's coming from Kanban. The second thing that Kanban is saying you that you should limit work in progress. which is done basically the way that you say, okay, there should be not more than X items in progress state. Yeah. So let's say that X is 5. So in my concrete implementation, I would say I do not want to have more than 5 things in progress state. Why we are doing that? Basically, it's a way how to try stopping or avoiding bottlenecks. Yeah. So not to have some state where I would have plenty of items accumulating and not moving further in the workflow. Yeah. So manage flow. Well, that's basically what I, to some extent, said. Yeah. So you don't want any bottlenecks. You want things to be flowing through the process. Process policies explicit, okay. Implement feedback loops and improvements. Well, these things are once again about improving the process that you already have. This is to some extent similar to Scrum, yeah, and basically anything that's lean. So trying to eliminate things that are not needed and improve overall the processes, which might mean that you would even at some moment change your workflow, or you will not change your workflow ever. Yeah? Kanban is not telling you when you should do these improvements or think about them, or it's saying basically that you should do it all the time, but it does not have any centralized events for this like Scrum has. Yeah? So nothing like sprint retrospective and so on. And Kanban as well does not have any iterations, or does not have to have iterations. So you can implement Kanban and still have iterations of any length. It's up to you. Yeah, saying so. Now I work on one release. It will take me 3 months, and after that I will work on another one. Well, 3 months is maybe a bit too long, so maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, but it does not have to be like that. Kanban can be as well really flow based. So you would have items coming from the left side to the right side, but you would not have there any iterations. Yeah? And you can have, for example, things released in the very moment when they get, in this example, to the done state. That's one of the options. Yeah? The other option is that they would be waiting there for some time, and then someone would decide, okay, now is the time to release everything that is in this done column, for example. But it can be really flow-based without any iterations. That's the main thing I wanted to say here. Okay, well, I'm getting to the comparison, which is actually quite good, looking at the time. Yeah, so speaking about Scrum, you have fixed scope for sprint. That has advantage, obviously, for the development team, because people are usually not very happy if someone is pushing into something that's already planned, some new items, and changing what they are working on and so on. So the team is usually happy about this. Maybe the users, business or product owner are not that happy about it, because they might find out that they would like to change something. So this is not good from their point of view, let's put it that way, or might not be good from their point of view. Then, yeah, a clear advantage of Scrum is that you have there clearly defined roles, especially the product owner. I already talked about that, but as well the Scrum Master. It's good if you have someone like product owner who can be the single voice of customers, stakeholders, and not 3 different stakeholders that have different requirements and different prioritization and so on. Yeah? So then it's a bit more difficult. But as well, you can have product owner in Kanban, but it's coming from Scrum. So in a typical, it's difficult to say what's typical, but if you would like just implement the smallest possible part of Kanban, you would not have their product owner. Regular delivery, that's clear in case of Scrum. Yeah, so after every sprint, you have some potentially releasable increment. It's for decision of the product owner whether it will be really released to production or not. But there is such a possibility. It requires teamwork. Well, this can be seen as an advantage or as well as a disadvantage. Because if the team really does not work as a team, if you have group of individuals where everyone takes care just about his or her own job, or job maybe is not the best word, yeah, but is taking care really about what they want to do themselves, like individuals, and not about the team, then you have a problem with Scrum. You really need a team for Scrum. And Kanban is quite prescriptive. So if you do not have much experience with any of these things, you can implement it easily by book because it's really prescriptive and telling you what you should do. Main disadvantage, in my opinion, actually is the time that you spend in all the Scrum events, yeah? Sprint planning, daily Scrums, and so on. I'm not saying that they are all useless, no, but overall the time spent in them is quite long usually. Yeah, so this is basically actually almost the last slide, and it's trying to say when Kanban can be better than Scrum. I'm not saying that it's better always. Yeah, in some environments, in some cases, Scrum will work better for you, as I discussed on the previous slide. But if you have things where it's not possible to fix the scope, then you cannot go for Scrum, right? Kanban can work with that. If you need to provide production support, so let's say that you are taking care of some application that's already productive, but you do not know how much time you will need to invest into production support, whether it will be 10% of the team capacity or 80, because it really depends what will be happening in that concrete weeks. Yeah, this makes using Scrum problematic. Scrum does not count with that. There are some workarounds how to live with that, but these are just workarounds, not real solutions. If you have problem with people, yeah, I already talked about it a bit. So if these are individuals and not really a team, or if you have people who are not really motivated, then it's almost impossible to do Scrum. It is still possible to do Kanban, not easy, meaning it's of course, if you have demotivated people, it's always bad, but still it's more acceptable, more survivable, not acceptable, with Kanban than with Scrum. If you have very short project, it does not make sense to invest into setting up Scrum. Very small teams, I talked about that. Problematic external dependencies. Yeah, someone else should deliver something for you, and you cannot create a new version of your application without that. Once again, Kanban can easily live with things coming somehow irregularly and not being really planned from the beginning, even beginning of sprint, not beginning at all. Whereas Scrum, if you do not deliver something for that that's planned for that concrete sprint, then you cannot deliver the sprint goal, right? So these problematic external dependencies make problems in Scrum. Company culture or management misaligned with Scrum. That's typical case. Yeah, you have a company that counts with managers and expects that the managers will be telling people what they should do and how they should do it and so on. Well, in that case, Scrum does not work, right? Because you should have there a team that's self-organizing, yeah? And so on. So Kanban is respecting the original roles. Therefore, you do not have this kind of problem there. Yeah, and I talked about flow-based Kanban without iterations already. On the right side, by the way, you can see our Kanban board of my team from Commerzbank from something like March this year. And it's possible to combine both. Yeah, I already said that we can take, for example, the role of product owner and use it in our Kanban implementation, which is, for example, what we are doing in our team. Yeah, We are as well doing sprint reviews and sprint retrospectives, but basically not really the planning, or at least not too much of planning. Although we are using Kanban, yeah? So you can take aspects from both of them and somehow combine them together. If you take Scrum and add something to it, for example, Kanban Board, which is very common, I would say that almost every implementation of Scrum I have ever seen is using Kanban Board as well. That's fine. And on the other hand, on the Kanban side, you can take some things from Scrum if you count it useful. Yeah, and that's about what I had here. Yeah. So I would be ending with this slide that's mentioning the just few of currently opened positions in Commerzbank, and as well some jobs that we have for students where we count with something like 50% contract, meaning 50% of usual working time. As well, on some of the standard positions, we are offering 70% contracts. But I will not go deeper into that. If you are interested, just look on Jobs CZ.
I finally realized what's the difference between Scrum and Kanban, because I never had a chance to listen it in such a package before. So really, I have to thank you for this introduction.
Thank you very much.
Fine.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and yeah, enjoy your student time.
I think just Masood as well as Harold, I already finished their studies, so both of them are looking for job. So this was a kind of getting to know people inside from Commerzbank to learn how they work, what they work on, and what they can do. So I guess both of them will just think how to pass any resume or whatever to Iveta or your colleagues.
Actually, if you would look on the right side of this slide, this is my current team. So now you can see how the people in Commerzbank look like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.